Hi, this is Alex Sepassi with Silver Relics, and you're listening to Rock at Night.
Are you ready? Hey, tonight I'm gonna take you on a little trip. We're going down south by the mighty Mississippi. I'm gonna take you to a place where lights never dim. Bring your mother, your brother, and your best friend. I'm gonna show you where they dance out in the street. They'll tell you all about your body heat. I'm not gonna talk about it, just gonna do it. Get on down if you feel up good. Get on down.
Hi, this is Anita Stewart. I'm the managing editor with Rock at Night. And today we're chatting with Alex Sepassi of the New York City indie band Silver Relics. They have an upcoming album, and we just recently reviewed their latest single release titled Tales. Alex has been writing music for years, and he's influenced by so many bands and genres. The band recently reformed and also switched out their lineup a little bit, and we'll talk about that as we go through these questions. So let me ask the first one, Alex, and I want to thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, who were some of the artists that inspired you when you were young? And the reason I ask that is because you're from New York City, and there's so many different influences that you could have gone with and types of music that you could play. So what really kind of grabbed you and took hold?
To be completely honest, my parents had a lot to do with it, and my family in general. I have a brother and younger sister, so we're a big family, and we're close too. So we would always trade music, and our parents got us a guitar. I think I was 9, and my brother might have been 10 at the time, or maybe 11. I don't remember. But Beach Boys and the Beatles, that type of generation, The Who, The Doors, all of those bands from the 60s and early 70s were around, along with classical music, actually, too. My mom's a big fan of classical, and so is my father. So it was always a mixed bag. And, as an artist, as I got older, you always hear people say, what are you listening to lately? And then the most common answer is everything, right? People are like, I listen to everything.
Right.
And I think there's something to that. And I wouldn't say I do it on purpose, but the style that I've kind of come into, to answer the question about, how did it, with all the influences, it's a great question. Like, with all the influence that's floating around, why this? It really is as simple as, when forming Silver Relics, treating it as an art project and kind of allowing it to be as open as possible so that you can do the genre bends. You can bend into, as many as you'd like under the scope of rock and roll. And it should, hopefully to the listener, feel consistent. There should be some consistency there. So don't ask me how that happens, because I really don't know. I didn't go to school for music. I'm self-taught. But I think it's just being such a huge fan of all these bands, the classic bands and the ones from 60s. I mean, pretty much every decade. It's difficult for me not to absorb those things subconsciously when I'm listening throughout the years. And so one way or another, they find their way into these, what start as demos and then eventually into songs, and that we take to the band and then suss out and record. So that's been the process lately for the past, since Silver Relics has started.
Now, you were raised, of course, like you said, with a brother and a sister. Were all three of you in music, and did you have any exposure to it in church or school? Did you take the regular classes? I know I took choir and chorus and all of that. So.
Sure. Oh, sorry. So they're twin sisters. So there are 4 of us all together.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes, we went to church. It was kind of by circumstance. One of my best friend's father happened to be the preacher at a local church, and he was awesome. So we would just go every Sunday. Became like a social gathering, and there was choir. I to be honest with you, was way too shy to get in front of that whole congregation and sing any of these tunes. But of course, I was more of a active listener, sit in the back. I've always kind of been that type of person, more of a taking it in through observation.
Right.
So I think that I just feel like I've been a continuous or a perpetual student from the beginning, and how it all came to be was just, it really is just certain things you cling on to and certain things you don't. But I've kind of always wanted to. What I will say is, church absolutely brought in the idea of how cool harmonies could be and how useful those might be and will work, because you could hear them loud and clear when you're in church. So I would say that in tandem with the Beatles and the Beach Boys and all the other things that I was kind of absorbing at the time really had a huge impact on me.
Right. Who were some of your favorite bands as you started? Now, you started into music like about the age of 10, but who were some of your favorite bands when you were a teenager, and who did you want to emulate, as it were?
Okay, great question. Let me see if I can think about this. So I know that I was a huge fan of Radiohead, a lot of English bands. Oasis was huge in the 90s, in the 2000s, right. So I listened to those guys quite a bit. A lot of Manchester bands such as Elbow, Dubs. I don't know if you've heard of those guys. Johnny Marr, the Smiths.
Right.
I like Nirvana. The grunge scene was really big too, right? So Stone Temple Pilots, Nirvana, and Soundgarden were big ones that I would listen to often. But basically, there were a lot of mainstream artists that I kind of listened to because they all had like a certain sense of pop. They had pop sensibility, and I think I've always gravitated towards that.
Yes, something that may be rock, but that can end up on a top 40 radio show and get more listeners actually that way. So that's
exactly
how I always like pop/rock. So when did you finally realize you were going to make this a profession? When was that point?
I think before I even graduated college, actually going into college, I was in a high school band. My friends and I played after school, and then we would play some shows, and it came pretty apparent from the first few shows and being on stage in general and playing in front of people, and then I never really had the desire to learn too many covers. I was all about trying to figure out how to make my own stuff, our own stuff, and so I would say, short answer, it became very apparent from a young age, and I think I kind of made the transition seamlessly in that I moved to New York.
So you all were in Pennsylvania. Is that where you went to school? I mean,
Sorry.
I thought I saw some. You there? Hello?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. I saw somewhere that you had gone to school in Scranton, so I just assumed you had. Yeah, so I assumed you were in Pennsylvania for a while and then moved to New York. Is that how it happened?
Exactly. So while I was a freshman in Scranton, I was like, I wanted, just based on, my upbringing, I wanted to go to a 4-year school, and I honestly didn't think to go to a music school. I just, I don't know that I was thinking that far ahead at the time at 18, but basically, as soon as the graduation happened, I moved straight to New York, and then I haven't stopped since. It's been at first it started with just singer-songwriter stuff, trying to get a feel for the city, a feel for the songs, and just to put yourself out there. And then, starting a band shortly thereafter, and I've been in bands ever since. I don't think that I've thought of any other profession at any point quite like music. It's just one of those things that, I always just say if something else came along at some point that was just like a neon blinking sign that said, all right, maybe this is the new profession or this is what you should be doing, then I would have no problem saying, hey, this is how I'm feeling about it or recognizing it. But that's truly and honestly never happened. It's always been this.
So you had maybe several incarnations of Silver Relics, and you have just recently switched out 2 members of your lineup, and 2 more joined you. So it says here that Mark Crozer from Jesus and Mary Chain, he's the bassist, and you
Correct.
also switched your drummer for Hitomi, which is unusual because that's I assumed she was female, and that
Yes.
just seems to be like I couldn't tell exactly from the pictures that I saw, but that seems to be like the thing now. I mean, many bands in the past always liked having a female front woman to sing, and then after that, for a while, it seemed to be the female bass player, and now it seems to be a thing to have a female drummer. It's unusual. In fact, we just saw the Struts, and Starbenders opened up for the Struts, and they also had a female drummer named Emily Moon. So that's kind of interesting that that's becoming a trend. So has that switch out of some of the lineup changed any of your music or the consistency of the music that you play?
Absolutely. There's a couple parts to that. So I've played with, for me, it's always best player wins, and the ones that, it's a specific type of player, and the gender isn't kind of an afterthought. But so I think, if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure, aside from fronting the band, which makes sense, I've had females in every some iteration of the band on bass, guitar, / I don't think I've this is the first female drummer. Hitomi would be the first female drummer I've ever worked with. But Hitomi's, her father was a drummer, or is a drummer as well. So it's kind of a legacy thing. And her dedication is amazing, and precision is amazing. And she truly is just a remarkable musician, an artist. And as is Mark. And so the way that it kind of, and there's another person that we need to add to this list, because yes, we lost a drummer, Justin. He left music, the one that was recording initially with on Generic Record, and our producer Howie passed away last year. So all this during COVID. So there was definitely a lot to think about, and how to piece this back together with all the songs that were accumulating, and looking at personnel. Obviously there were spots that needed to be filled, such as big ones like the rhythm section. So, and in some,
right.
So it was difficult, but there weren't any active members besides myself for a while there. Myself and Mark, but we were separated. He was in Brooklyn, I was in Manhattan. That was that until we could get until the vaccines came along. So we added Brian, who performed drums on Tails. Brian is the drummer for the Jesus and Mary Chain. So the track that you hear, the one that's for Tails, is the rhythm section for that band. Brian's on drums. He also produced it, and Mark's on bass. And Hitomi came in after that. And she's so now it's the 4 of us working together. Just recently got back from a trip out in LA, working with Brian, and we were able to get a bunch of songs done. So I plan on heading back out there and completing the rest of it once we get Hitomi tracked here. So it's I don't mean to be confusing, but it is definitely we're jumping around a lot, these days. It's like I don't know if there's a chronological there's a schedule, of course, but it's I think the job is just trying to get these songs recorded the best way possible, you know what I mean?
Right. Did you have a burst of creativity during the COVID lockdowns? It seems like that was a real creative time for a lot of artists and musicians, just having that kind and that amount of downtime all at one period. How did that work for you?
Sure, I did. I think I worked extra hard. It was nice to have that time initially, which was I think it was supposed to be 2 months here in most places, the 2-month lockdown, which seemed reasonable, feasible, whichever word you like to use. And in that time, I think that there was it was pretty prolific. But then one of the things that I took away from it was the absence of a drummer and a rhythm section in general, and the beauty of being able to work with other musicians and what type of weight that actually carries is like one of the biggest takeaways that I took away from the pandemic, or this pandemic.
Right.
And not, I demo songs at my apartment or wherever I need to in the studio that I use in Williamsburg, but it's never a completed idea until the band's involved, until there's, the percussive elements start to come in, and otherwise it's pretty similar to what it was like when I first moved into to New York with the acoustic. It's just the foundation of the songs built. So I recognize the importance of team in a completely different way, and emphasis on team. And for that, I think that's what really I put my focus on, was rebuilding a team, a powerful team, so that we could, keep turning out songs like Tales, hopefully, That was
now
the
you're with all these new people. Have you is everybody assisting in writing new songs, or do you come up with the original idea or concept and then everybody else pitches in their part? Is that how that works?
Well, I write the songs, and I usually delegate, and I have a roundabout way of what I think the feel of the song, the tempo of the song, the tone, the arrangement. But Brian's an excellent producer, so his input from the production side could easily change those things. I take that into consideration, but typically the foundation of the songs are built for the members, so that when they come in, they have a strong sense of what the song should feel like, So I try to make their lives a little bit easier in that. But we also have changed things completely, and slowed the song down, cut it in half, the tempo, or things like that, if it makes sense to do it. But again, you'll never really know until you get in a room together, which is the beauty of, having that, being able to do that all over again. A newfound appreciation for all of that.
No, I listened to a little bit of Generic, and it's kind of interesting. The album is great. It's 12 cuts, and I seem to really like the songs with the explicit lyrics. So that would be Submarine and Small Talk. I really liked. I liked Generic because you do have a couple videos on YouTube of you performing that song, but really, really Class A album, and I definitely want to hear it with some good sounds in my car. So, I'm going to be putting it on my playlist on that. But now you supported that album, and of course that was right before COVID. So that album dropped in May of 2019. So you actually went to the UK and Ireland, and how was the reception there as far as with fans and venues and all of that? Because it seems to me like it's a different world for a lot of artists, and the music scene is so different there because it's such a smaller population, and people play in clubs, not the big venues as much. So how did you find that it was a little different than being here in the States?
So absolutely, it was different. So first of all, our friend Dermot Lambert from Garageland, Ireland, helped put the tour together in both spots, in Ireland and in the UK. So he's excellent at building strong bills. So one of the first things I took away from it was in Ireland especially, there was just so many youngsters, new bands. I'm talking, fresh out of high school, but they were really good players. All the bands sounded really, really good. Not to say that that's different than here, but there was a stacked bill. There'd be like 6 bands on the bill here, right? So the set times varied too. The clubs themselves, that didn't feel that different. I mean, I think a stage is a stage type of thing. The setup and the sound systems were all great. We were fortunate to play at good venues, so that wasn't too much of a, I wouldn't say a new experience, but of course the crowd was, and the whole, the landscape changed things. There was, places when we played Brighton, for example, was like, close to the water, and it was just a completely new experience. There was Stones. I think the Green Door Store was the venue we played, and it was an old stable for horses. So there was cobblestones all over, and it was beautiful, but it was very unusual.
Yeah.
It kind of had this darker feel to it, but it was the beach is right there, so it was also it's just a very unusual venue, which made it so great, and we love doing things like that. So we had a really great. That was the intention for Generic, and I'm so glad we did it. Obviously, going into the pandemic, I mean, I'm happy we were able to do that, and I'd love to get back over there again. But that was our main focus, was to get to the UK and to Ireland, to just because of the songs of Generic basically come from a very Britpop sensible background.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I mean, most of the artists that we deal with for Rocket Night are from England, and that's who buys our print magazine, actually. So we're in touch with a lot of them and promote them and also do stories.
Amazing.
But, yeah, the whole scene is different over there, and our editor goes over regularly to cover concerts over there and do interviews. So she is supposed to go back soon. I'm not sure exactly when, as long as, the travel is okay. So that's the big thing. We need to find out if, people are going to be able to travel in several months. We don't know. So so with this new album, does it have a concept or something that draws a particular subject that draws all the songs together?
Lyrically, they're connected. There's a period of time that none of us have experienced in our lifetime. I think that all of that has, possibly by osmosis or just something completely conscious, has definitely found its way into the songs. A lot of that has to do with hope. I think it's so far it's a hopeful record. It's more on the I'd say it's a positive. It's got a lot of positive. I don't know about undertones. Is that the word for it? In terms of concept, in terms of a concept record like Pink Floyd, The Wall, those records that have the connection through and through from track one to that part is yet to be determined. It could easily turn into that. In my experience, they tend to turn out like that, like Generic. It's not necessarily an intentional move, but oftentimes I've spoken to during a lot of the Generic interviews. That came up a lot. They're like, so how did you plan this concept record? I'm like, what do you mean? It's not necessarily a concept. So I'd have to. So that was but that was also really a flattering thing to hear. So it's just they thought that it was all connected, and it is. But I guess all that to say, it probably will sound pretty similar to that, just by the way that I write and the way that we perform it. So I expect
now,
that.
During the pre-interview, we talked a little bit about how you came up with the title for your first album, which is Generic, and there's also a title track on the album with the same name. So how will that name come for the second album? How will that be created?
So I think that for Generic, it was one of those things that took shape, and then there was no other. Once Generic was planted in my head as a candidate for the title itself, after the tracks had been completed or were getting close to completion, it really just stood out as the only move. It became extremely evident that this record needed to be called that, regardless of the fact that there was a track that already, a pre-existing track with that title. Don't ask me why. It just kind of came to, and when I brought it to Justin and Howie, they were just like, absolutely. We were just all like, aha, that's the one. So I fully expect that to happen for the sophomore record, the one we're working on right now. Hopefully that will be released at some point. We expect it to be completed this year. And I'm excited about what that would look like or what the title would be, but we don't have anything quite yet. It's to be determined at this moment.
So you're recording the music on both coasts or just out in LA at this time?
Both, exactly. So the studio that I'm working at, Brent Gassman runs a studio in Williamsburg. He's one of my best friends. He's an amazing engineer and producer. And we have Mark and Hitome recording there. And then Brian and I are working separately in LA, where I was last week. And the week before that, I think it was about a 2-week stay. And so I'm trying to utilize to pick the best personnel so we have, I guess, a diverse soundscape. You know, it's evolving when you have 2 drummers on the track, or you have 2 separate drummers playing on a record. So it's definitely a bi-coastal record in that sense, shaping up to be one, at least.
Right. We're getting a little close to the end of our time, but I did want to ask you just a couple more questions. You traveled to the UK and Ireland. Where are some other locations that you would like to tour in eventually?
Great question. South America has always been on the list. I've never been, and it seems close. So I'd like to get down there, maybe starting in or even Mexico. You know, someplace south of, anything south sounds like a really. It's always been something that I've looked forward to at some point. Japan, East Asia. I'd love to perform there too. Just seems like a rite of passage at this point. So I'm looking forward for travel to open up again. And also, just to say it, in Europe, there are a lot of places that we've yet to go, but I'd love to get back to the UK and Ireland again, which I've mentioned, but there's obviously a lot more places to hit, so I want to do a European tour at some point as well.
It seems like the places that you mentioned are the places where they really, really appreciate American rock and roll and American artists. I've looked at some of the concerts that they've done, you know, different bands have done in Brazil, for instance, and the audiences just go crazy there for American anything. And it's pretty much, it looks like it's the same in Japan, too. So, and, of course, England, they just appreciate the blues. They appreciate anything Americana that, you know, comes from our music scene here. So,
absolutely.
So, yeah. So where do you see you and the band in the next 5 years?
I see us with at least another couple records released under to add to our catalog, so an extension of the catalog. And I fully expect us to actually reach those places that we just spoke about, to tour and to really perform these songs outwardly as much as we possibly can. So I would say in the traditional sense of what we kind of come to, or at least the expectation of a rock band is to, you know, you write the record and then you go out and perform it. I want to do the same thing. That's kind of what I've always wanted to do and what I would like to continue to do. So in 5 years from now, hopefully the stages become bigger and, you know, and the the landscape changes too. So we can get out to Japan, we can get out to South America, the west coast of the United States. After being out in LA for a while, it was, you know, we're obviously going to have to do a show out there. There are a lot of places to play, so I want to get there and do as many as I can for as long as I can.
And the last question I was going to ask was, how do you define your music? It's really hard for me to place it in a genre, but have you done that?
It's so funny. I get that question a lot, and it seems to be one of those things where it's like, oh, what is it exactly? I always just say, you know, it falls under the scope of rock and roll, and if you can conceptualize the fact that there's such a broad spectrum of what that means, rock and roll. You said blues not too long ago. Absolutely. Kind of the inception of it all, you know, from the 50s moving forward. I've listened to things from the 50s, 60s, 70s, from the various decades. So I think, like we said in the early part of this interview, was I see no reason why they can't all be incorporated, and therefore it becomes difficult to define.
Right.
But it all falls under the scope of rock and roll. The easiest way that I've kind of said it is, at this point, it sounds like an indie arena rock band. You know, that's
right. Exactly.
People are like, okay, that makes sense. You know, it seems like that's an easy thing to grasp onto, and
right.
That's as close as I've gotten.
Well, I want to thank you very much for joining us here at Rock at Night. And for anybody that is looking for Alex and his band, Silver Relics, you can check out his official website. It's linked on our articles on Rock at Night. He has the official website, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, the usuals under Silver Relics. And Alex, thank you so much, and we will be posting this shortly, and we're wishing you the best of luck on this new album, but definitely make sure we get it before it's released so we can review it. So
absolutely. I really appreciate you guys. Thanks, Anita. I'm happy to be here. It was great talking to you, and I will let you know when we get a little bit closer to completion. I look forward to seeing more of your articles. Big fan.
Thank you so much. You have a great evening, and we'll be in touch soon.
Yes, you too. Thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye now.
You're listening to Rock at Night.
The introductory song, Get On Down, is from blues artist Billy Bass Alford. Look for his music at ReverbNation.com.